Hey guys, welcome back to Corky Gachas, and in this video we're going to talk everything about cards in Ragnarok Origin Global, which are the best cards and who are they for. So I'm going to touch on them based on their respective category, meaning I'm going to move from the weapons and then up to the headgear, the accessories, etc, so that it will cover all the classes. I will name which cards are best for which build. So first up, I'm going to touch on the weapon slot, and here it's quite simple, quite generic. You always want to go for ratio cards, you always want to go for elemental cards. Ratio cards are those that deals extra damage 20% to the race itself, and then the elemental cards are self-explanatory, right? Also dealing 20% damage to a specific element. These are generally cheap with the exception of Hydra card, which is demi-human, so it's more for PvP, but I would say that you do want to collect this, right, based off what you want to grind in the future or what you want to level on in the future, your leveling spots, and also specifically maybe you want to target certain MVPs and then you are going to have the ratio cards for this MVPs itself. For Sin Nexus, you do need 4 of this mix and match for your daggers because you are going to have 4 slots compared to 2 slots in other like classes, so it's going to be a bit more expensive for Sin Nexus. However, for generically purposes, you do want to collect everything, right? Because outside of leveling, outside of the MVPs itself, you want to have a like a category, or you want to have a good collection so that you can cater to any scenario, be it farming, monster research in the future, etc, etc. But a lot of these cards can also be obtained through the store as well as the various redemptions like stores itself, right? Outside of paying Zenny, you can just pay for those currency and they can be obtained quite easily. Vedon card, for instance, you can see here you can get it from the Academy shop. I did get 1 copy from the Academy shop itself, so this will save you a lot of Zenny and try to collect everything. Now moving on, I'm going to talk about specific cards in the event you do not have the ratio cards, right? So what events would you not have ratio cards? In the event in PvP, for instance, because the skeleton worker card is so expensive and also the Hydra card is so expensive, you might not have this cards, which will bring the need for other cards to come in, right? So namely for wizards, you definitely want the magic attack card, which is the boa card. It always gets snatched up, and the reason is because people need multiple copies of it, right? So what do I mean by that? If you go into the store itself and I click on the boa card, you do have to awaken it to max level to for level 15 to get the magic attack plus 5%. So this is extremely important, and the reason why you always say out of sale, right? So this is something that wizards want to grab. You use it in PvP, given that you don't have Hydra card, you don't have skeleton worker card. But if you have those, I do think that the Hydra and skeleton workers are always going to be better than boa card. So this is more for general purpose, right? You can use it on anything, and they are relatively cheap to start with, just that it's harder to snatch. The next one is going to be for hunters and for auto attack builds, whereby in PvP you do want to potentially inflict statuses on them, and the best card for hunters I would say is the Requiem card. So Requiem card is over here. It does have a 5% chance to inflict fear. Fear is freaking OP on top of having the attack, right? So when you are feared, right, you are going to not be able to control your character, but you can use the Panacea to cure it, but most people don't really do that, and you just want to like stack this 2 of this card so you have a 10% chance of inflicting fear, and then they are just going to be helpless while you shoot them down from a range, right, with your ADL build. This is freaking popular and it's always out of stock. You can see right here, still out of stock. So you always want to snatch it during the refresh periods, the first 5 minutes, otherwise you are going to have no chance for hunters. And then potentially you can also use something like a Metala card, which is silencing the enemy. It's also quite good, but I would say that the Requiem card is much better for ADL hunters. And then for the rest of the people, you can still use the Marina card and then use wind converters in PvP. This is something that I've seen people do. However, do note that some skills itself, they do not carry the effect of your weapon, so you wouldn't be able to freeze an enemy, for instance, with a soul breaker if you're an assassin, right? So this has been tested, so it doesn't work. So this is what I want to suggest. And lastly, also there's a Magnolia card. So this is all for the weapon slot. Going next into the shields, it's quite straightforward. There's only 2 valuable cards, right, outside of course the MVP cards. It's going to be, first one, it's the Megalodon card, as well as secondly the Tara Frog card. So the Tara Frog card, of course, we know that this is for PvP and it's quite I wouldn't say it's the most expensive, but it's still decently priced, lower than 1 million, but usually I set it around 500-600k for Tara Frog. So this is good if you want to PvP. There is an option also to go for Horn Cut. However, it's going to be a bit more niche, right? Just trying to protect yourself from hunters and in the future Shield Boomerang Paladins itself. So I would definitely prefer going for Tara Frog, although the Horn Cut does give more reductions in terms of damage. And the Megalodon Cut is going to be a cheap option that also gives you a lot of benefits. So you can see right here, it gives you freeze resistance, and freeze is quite annoying. A lot of in PvP scenarios, you do get freeze quite a lot with Stormgust. Although most of the wizards now, high wizards nowadays spam gravitational field, some people still spam level 1 Stormgust, and it has like 54% freeze chance if I'm not wrong. So freeze resistance helps a lot, and of course mainly it's for the main max HP, right? And with a cheap cut, you can also very easily awaken it, and it's always for sale, so you can definitely grab them up, and at max you can get 7% HP and also 30% freeze resistance. So this is one of the good cuts. Alternatively, you can also go with other 4% cuts, but I don't really think the rest are that good unless you are in specific scenarios. For instance, the Moonak cut, which does reduction in earth damage, but this one is quite specific, so you can definitely collect those. They are so cheap that you can just collect all of them, right? But I would suggest awakening the Megalodon cut if you want to focus on what. Now moving on to the armor, the top cut that I would recommend for general use is going to be Peko Peko, because Peko Peko gives you 5% HP, and honestly there are no better cuts for general purpose when it comes to the armor slot, so just go with the Peko Peko. It's always out of sale as well. However, I would say that the second most important cuts, right, is going to be the elemental armor cuts, and the elemental armor cuts can be found over the 61 to 80 range as well as the 81 to 100. So you have the Sandman, which changes your armor to earth, and then Swordfish changes your armor to water, Donkerbee change to wind, Air Group change to poison, and also Pangsana change to fire. Of course, you have Ghost Ring to change to ghost, but Ghost Ring card is going to be quite hard to get, and honestly champions are not out yet, so you don't really need Ghost Ring card per se. And here, the reason why you want these cards is mainly, as of right now, you want them for MVP scenarios, or you want to reduce damage in PvP scenarios. And the top one that I would say you really want is probably going to be Swordfish. If people were to spam Stormgust, you would probably have the Swordfish card to really tide you through. However, given that people are spamming Gravitational Field, these cards are more for PvP or PvE in my opinion. And in the future, there's going to be a content release whereby you do need these cards to be able to tank, right? Even for the DPS, if you don't have these cards to change your element to the same element as the bosses, you're going to die instantly. So start saving them up and try to grab them as soon as possible. They are not the most expensive right now, but when the advanced content does release, I do see a surge. I'm going to expect a surge in the prices for this cards. And for PvP itself, I would say that the Mark card is one of the best, but it's quite rare and it's an auction card, so you wouldn't be able to get your hands quite easily onto it. And there is also some benefits to not being immune to freeze, because if someone were to spam Stormgust, although there are not that many Stormgust means, in future WoE you are going to receive more damage from Stormgust, because usually Stormgust freezes you after a few ticks, and once you're frozen, you cannot receive more damage from the Stormgust. But if you are not frozen, you're going to continuously take damage from it. So potentially it might be counterintuitive, but in most of the scenarios it's going to be good, especially in the future when the bards come out, right? So they are able to freeze you using their skills itself. And also something notable is going to be the Conductor's card. So the Conductor's card is good only in the future. I don't think it's good right now, because it does make your armor indestructible, and it's going to be useful when the creators get released. However, right now I don't think it's that useful. I do know that Whitesmith, I'm not sure if Whitesmiths do break armor. Can leave a comment in the comment section below, but if they do, definitely this can be useful in PvP scenarios. But I would say general purpose, just go with Peko Peko card. Now on to the cloak. We are going to have a lot of variation unlike the armor, and first I'm going to talk about the most generic ones first, which is the elemental reduction. So you can see the mask card over here, and you also have the respective ices, the dustiness, the Hood, as well as the Mist, and also there is the Orc Baby. So Orc Baby is an auction card, but it's quite self-explanatory, right? All of them reduce damage taken from a specific element by 15%, and Orc Baby reduces from neutral damage, non-elemental ones by 15%, which is also the most valuable, given that most MVPs do deal neutral damage. So this is where Orc Baby comes in clutch. So these are the generic cards. Honestly, everyone should get a set of it, and especially the tanks would really need to get this, because without the specific cards for the element itself, tanking can be quite trouble, especially to the higher levels, right? So I would suggest for people to collect. So far I haven't collected that many. I do think I have an Isis as well as a mask card. I'm not sure if I have it, but these are the cards that I've collected so far. I'm intending to collect the whole set. Now for the wizards, you are going to want the Feudora card because of the Intel +3 as well as the variable CD -3%. So this is going to be super useful. And for the rest of the classes, right, for tanks, in the future, Paladin, Devotion Paladins, you might potentially want to go with a Eclipse card. So Refine +10, you will have Max HP +3%. And then now you might say, hey, Koki, this is a mini card, right? So it's very hard to obtain, but actually you can get it from the Courage shop, and I do have enough currency to change for it. So I don't buy it yet because my cloak is not at Refine +10, so it wouldn't be able to utilize. Alternatively, you can exchange for the Choco card, which also gives max HP +10%, but this adds Flee instead, and it doesn't give the extra bit, right? So Eclipse, if you have a +10 refined cloak for the tanky mains, as well as the Chocos for those that don't have +10 cloak. And then for the other classes, specifically the Urgy builds, you might be looking at something like a Vagabond card, as well as the Ninetales card. So Ninetales is an auction card, and honestly, although it gives Urgy +3 and Flee +10, I don't think it's that good for its price. I would suggest that melee classes also try to just go for the Orc Baby card instead, because surviving is going to be more key. So this is just my opinion. Even for Urgy mains, perhaps you want to stick to this neutral damage reduction cards. And now I'm going to give a special mention to one of the elements that I forget to mention just now, and that is Marionette card. So you can see how to obtain this, right? It is in the shop, and it's freaking cheap compared to other ones. It's only 30k. I'm not sure why it's so cheap, but it is super good in PvP because everyone and their mothers are now spamming Gravitational Field, and Gravitational Field is a ghost type damage. So if you were to grab up the Marionette cards, you will be able to reduce Gravitational Field damage. So this is just a special mention for countering the wizards in PvP. Coming down to the last few slots, we have the shoes, and for the shoes, it is quite straightforward. You only have a few options. You can see there's not much here, and the best one for general purpose use is going to be Sohi. So Sohi does give the most max HP at 4%, and also gives you SP recovery. However, in the future, when champions are going to be released, you probably wouldn't want Sohi card as a champion. You might want a Varied card, because the Asura damage does depend on your max HP, so this will be a better card for champions. And the budget options for Sohi, right, because you can see Sohi right here is at 40k. Although not the most expensive, it is always out of stock. So you might want to go with an Agra card, as well as a Merman card for the time being, and then upgrade to Sohi in the future. This is the budget options. For the Urgy mains, you do want to go with the Martel card, because it does give you max HP on top of giving you Urgy, albeit only one, right? But you can grab every single stat, especially when you have the stat up to very high. Adding one more extra stat is going to be super expensive, so you definitely want to grab as much stats as possible. And that is just about it for all the notable cards. The rest of the cards are honestly MVP and super expensive cards that you are not going to be able to obtain as of this moment, the mini cards, and that is the reason why I wouldn't really recommend. As well as the Walrus card, although it is a normal creep, it is lacking in the HP department, so I don't really recommend it over the Martyr card. Now onto the accessories. This is the slot whereby a lot of variation is going to happen based on what kind of a build you are running. So this is where I'm going to touch on different builds and what cards are going to be best for them. So I'm going to touch on first the ADL Hunters. The ADL Hunters would definitely want the Zerome card, because it gives you Dex +3 as well as Crit +2. So this is quite self-explanatory, right? Dex and Crit is all good stats. If in the early game you do not have those like the money as well as the option to buy it, because in the early game people are probably not going to sell it that often, the Zerome cards, you can go with Stem Worm, and at Awaken 1 already it gives Dex +3 3. So this is a super cheap option. You can see it's only selling for 4K in my server, so this is very good alternative, budget alternative. The next one I'm going to touch on is the Urgy Knights, and once again also the Synexes that are running double daggers doing the auto attack rate cut builds, right? So you definitely want to go for Kobold for the crit as well as for the strength, or you can go with the Mantis for the strength and for the attack percentage. However, this attack percentage is also going to be helpful to a lot of physical classes if you are not running auto attack builds. So this, what I would say, is a generic purpose for the damage DPS wise, right, for a lot of classes. But specifically for the Urgy Knights, you can also go with the Bond Gun cut because your bash is likely going to be max, so you can have a level 10 bash auto casted, especially if you have super high attack speed. You are going to cast it quite often, but this is quite gimmicky in my opinion, right? You can just go with the Mantis cut if you want a generic cut. For the daggers itself, right, the rate cut assassins with auto attack, you want to also go with Stem Worm cut for the same reason, right? It's the same as the Bongan alternative or the Bongan counterpart for the Sins itself. This is going to auto cast your rate cuts at 3%, but I don't really know if this is going to be as effective in my opinion. I feel like going with Mantis once again might be the better options for both of these classes. And feel free to let me know whether you guys have tested these cuts out and if they are really that effective, right, based on your attack speed. Next is going to be the Wizards, and for Wizards it's going to be a clear winner, and that is the Rave cut because it gives magic attack +5 as well as magic damage +1%. So this is super huge. Alternatively, you can go for Mimic. However, do note that in the late game itself, your variable CT is not going to be as important, so this is where the Rave cut really comes to shine. But for the time being, you can probably go with a Rave cut in the early mid game, and then later on you can switch it out for more Rave cuts. So this is my for the Wizards when it comes to DPS. However, given that you have multiple slots, right, some other things are also going to be valuable for Wizards when it comes to grinding, and one extra mention is going to be the Vitata cut because level 1 heal, right, in fact gives you a lot more heal or more HP compared to using white pots if you are a wizard, given that you have very low vit stats. So you have high intel, which means that the heal is going to do quite a bit. So for grinding, if you really need to, you can run with a Vitata cut. It's going to be quite valuable and super cheap, right, in the store, and you can get it super early on. It's 14k only, so for grinding it's going to be quite good. And then also there is going to be the Marine Sphere cut. So Marine Sphere cut is good for wizards because Magnum Break is actually going to add on fire attack bonus, so 20% fire attack bonus. This is also the reason why the Fire Spirit is good for the wizards, especially when they are still you are still leveling before you turn into a gravitational build, right? You are going with Meteor Storm. This is going to be super helpful, and it's also not the most expensive, so you can grab it and then subsequently you can sell it off, right? Very available as well, don't need to snatch at all. And then moving on, we are going to touch on the Vid focus builds. So for Vid focus builds, it's going to be one MVP cut. In fact, I would say that not just Vid focus builds, a lot of times in PvP, your builds are going to include a lot of Vid because the HP stat is super important in PvP, which is why Milka cut comes in super clutch. Milka cut is the best cut, honestly, when it comes to a green cut, right? It's crazy value. I don't know why it's so good value. Vid +3 for a green cut, and it's sold for like less than 10k if I'm not wrong. You can see that here we have very little Milka cuts, but in the start of the game itself, the Milka cuts are in fact only 4k, and even at 7k I would say that it's going to be super valuable. And the reason is because you can very easily max awaken it, right, or even mid awaken it, because at level 10 already have +1% HP as well as an extra Vid stat. So this is going to be super useful and also definitely a very good budget option. And with the slots coming in, right, you need a lot of like slots for your accessories. When you have those 2 slotted accessories, you're going to need 4 cuts. So the expensive cuts are going to pale a bit compared to like the budget cuts whereby you can awaken them. So Milka cut really comes in super clutch. I'm also accumulating more Milka cuts as we speak. I think I have 2 2-star Milka cuts now, and then I'm building another 2 2-star Milka cuts. So another option, now moving into PvP, we are going to talk about is the Smoky cut. Smoky cut is going to give you hiding level 1, and For people that played the classic RO, right, you might be thinking, hey, Cocky, the hiding level 1, right, is not going to be good, right? Hiding, just stand on the spot, you cannot move. But actually in Ragnarok Origin Global, there is no such thing as cloak, so you can only use hiding, and hiding allows you to move, albeit after you use hiding, the speed at which you move is going to decline by quite a bit after you stay in hiding for quite some time, right? But hiding is super useful for a lot of PvE scenarios, especially for melee classes. You can go near them, and then you'll be able to like sneak attack, right? Go into the range using charge attack with Lord Knight and stuff, and then you try to burst them off. And also for assassins, this card is like MVP. Definitely one of the best cards, because it also triggers your additional bonus, your damage when it comes to hiding. So Synexes definitely one smoky card. Another one is going to be Horong card, because Synexes are freaking annoying and they have triple heights with the smoky card. So you want Horong card to be able to counter them from that perspective. So these two cards are mainly for PvP. Now for the headgear part, it is very straightforward. There is one very good card, and then the rest are expensive but very niche cards. So the one good card that I mentioned is the Cram card. So this is attack plus 15, magic attack plus 15, and it is only a blue card, and it's relatively cheap, right? 20k. You can see that it's out of sale because it is so good. It used to be like 15k if I'm not wrong, but right now it's out of sale. You have to snatch it for sure. People want to awaken it, and also it's general purpose because of the dual coverage, right? And for Soulbreaker Assassins, of course, you are going to benefit from both of this. For the other niche cards that are more expensive, they are generally all auction cards, the good ones at least. It's going to be the GF card as well as the Marduk card. I don't think the Nightmare card is as good, at least for non-AG builds, right? But mainly you want the effect, which is the immune to fear for GF card, and like I mentioned, fear is very annoying, so you want to be immune to it to counter hunters. For Marduk card itself, people that use Metala card to counter you can have this card as well. And for wizards, you definitely want the Intel plus 3. Also for wizards, you can consider the Elder Willow card, but for the specific differences between the Willow and the Cram, honestly, I'm not that sure. It really depends on your build and how many stats you add on each, right, to see which one outweighs the other. So this is going to be the cards that you really want. Devilry card notably gives you strength plus 5, so if you were looking for DPS, you can go for this. But honestly, if you were to max awaken a Cram card, you might get the same value of a Devilry card, and that isn't the greatest effect in the world, right? So I don't think there's a need to counter it. The rest of cards are going to be super hard to get, and then the Steel Fur Grizzly, it's going to give you a lot of like vid itself, but I still feel like for the most part, right, Cram is the most accessible one, and it's going to be the best for you when it comes to max awakening, and very value indeed. Also for wizards, you can consider the Elder Willow card, but for the specific differences between the Willow and the Cram, honestly, I'm not that sure. It really depends on your build and how many stats you add on each, right, to see which one outweighs the other. Now lastly, for the face wear, the back wear, and the mouth wear itself, right, this three, it's really no options if I'm being honest. So if I'm just going to go to the store, and you can see, right, all these cards are being for sale. It's just the Goblin Chief, and it's just based on what really you need. I would say that you can collect all of those, but of course, having the medium-sized monsters plus 3% is going to be more valuable in PvP scenarios, and I do think that a lot of the enemies are going to be medium-sized. But for the MVP, you want the Agar Puppet card, and then for the Mouthwear, there's no option. You just go with the Angeling Puppet card, which gives you the 3% HP. And then for the Backwear itself, you can just go for the Dabbling for PvE, and then for PvP scenarios, you want to go with the Golden Teeth Buck. And how do you obtain these cards if not from the auction house? One of the recommendations I have for you guys is to go to the mystery shop. So here you can see that there is a rare card album, and there is a mystery store over here, and I've personally purchased 2. If I remember, I purchased 2 of those with the diamonds. Outside of that, you can grab the rest from the marketplace itself, because you are going to have duplicates if you keep opening the rare binder. It's not going to be worth it in the end. So I would say open the first 2. If you manage to get the Dabbling as well as the Goblin Puppet or the Agar card, then you can just purchase the rest from the trade place, right, the marketplace. Don't go and continue opening like 5 of these rare card binders. Your diamonds can be better spent on feathers, I would think. And that about does it for this video, where I cover all the notable cards for the various classes as well as the various slots. Also, if you're interested in seeing me gacha in the pouring chest lottery, definitely check out this video and see how my luck goes. I'll see you guys over there. This is Cocky Gachas, signing off.